It had snowed for 6 straight days. Heavy flakes drifted down like slow-falling prayers, softening the edges of the prairie until even the fence posts looked like old ghosts standing watch. Wind dragged its nails across the windows of Jedediah Boone's ranch house, but inside the fire cracked in its stone hearth. The lantern glowed its usual dim gold light. Patient, steady, Jed lit that lantern every evening, the same way he brushed his horse's mane and carved the names of long-dead cattle into the barn beams, not from routine, but from loyalty, because once, long ago, someone had waited for him to keep a promise. She was gone now, buried beneath a line of cottonwood crosses, but the promise had outlived her. No one had crossed that stretch of land in weeks. The trail had vanished under drifts and cold silence. Even the crows had headed south, so when he spotted shapes in the snow, 2 figures dark against all that white, his first thought was wolves. Then one of them stumbled. The taller figure grabbed the smaller one before she fell. Not wolves. People, barefoot, wrapped in deer hide and thin, worn shawls. Jed stayed on the porch. The lantern swung beside him in the wind. Its flame flickered across their faces, making their eyes shine like startled deer. They didn't speak. They just waited at the edge of the yard as if unsure whether to step closer or run. Jed raised a hand. Not an invitation, not a warning. Something in between. A small gesture, quiet as breath. Enough to hold them. The older girl gave a slow nod and guided the younger forward. He pulled the barn door open for them. They stepped inside. He didn't follow right away. Instead, he stood there, letting the snow soak through his boot while he stared into the dark behind them, half expecting a third figure to emerge. Someone chasing, someone claiming, but there was nothing. Only wind and a silence so old it felt like it belonged to the land itself. Inside, the barn smelled of wet hide, straw, and faint wood smoke. The girls pressed close to the milk cow, who shifted her weight but didn't object. Jed set down a tin cup of hot coffee beside the stall post. He didn't say a word. He didn't know if they understood English. The older girl picked up the cup. Her hands were raw and cracked from cold. A pale scar cut through her bottom lip. Her eyes didn't beg. They measured him. She didn't thank him, but she didn't spill their coffee either. When he turned to leave, the younger girl, barely more than Akiled, whispered something in a tongue Wei didn't understand. The older girl didn't translate. Back in the house, he left the door unlatched. That night, hadn't sleep, just sat in the rock-a-bye fire, whittling an old cedar stick down to nothing. Outside, the snows wallowed every sound, but he couldn't stop. Hearing that whisper, by dawn, D-girls were on the porch. He opened the door before they knocked. They looked at Horth, frozen, shivering with bowed heads. He pointed to the hearth. They stepped inside. It took 3 hours for their hand stove stopped trembling. The younger one, he saw, now walked with a limp. The older girl let her take the only chair and sat cross-legged on the floor. Jed boiled beans and gave him what bread he had, though. Girls ate with careful hands, grateful but controlled, not desperate. He still didn't ask questions. The sun rose and set again. On the second morning, the younger girl's fever broke. Jed left water in a basin on the porch. When he returned from chopping wood, The other girl had already washed Hustus's hair and hung the clothes tawdry. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching. She met his gaze for the first time, not with fear. She stood, walked over, and said her first word, Chenoa. He blinked. "My sister," she said, pointing toward the girl. "Tisa," he nodded. "Jed?" She paused. Jed, the word didn't fit. In her mouth, not quite. She tried again, Jedediah Thatch, got right later when he saddled. Damaya to ride into town for supplies. Chenoa followed him halfway to Thagate. Snow had started again. Thin flakes that curled like lace on her dark braid. "You come back?" she asked. He looked at her, hard-eyed, unreadable, and nodded once. "I light the lantern every night." She tilted her head. "Why?" He said nothing, just rode off. The general store was colder than Thepari, not by temperature, but by twok. Clovis Hatch, the blacksmith, leaned in when Jed passed him. "You know how they—" "Ah," Jed said nothing. Clovis spat a wet glob onto the plank floor, Comanche-eyed bet. Runaways or tradigials. Dangerous either way. Jed paid for flour, salt, dried meat, and a tin of cherry tobacco. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow. "You expect company, Boone?" Jed shrugged. "Depends how long the snow holds." Back home, Chenoa met him at Thegget again. She didn't ask about their tobacco, but she tucked it into their board like it was sacred. Tate Veening, Jed walked out to the porch to find the curtain in the main room had been sewn. Not replaced, just mended, stitches tight, even done by someone Hune's knew comfort and wanted to remember it. He didn't say a word, but he left the slate. Wife's old scarf on the peg beside the door. Blue, worn, and warm. The next morning, Chenoa wore it. Chested beans while he chopped wood. Tea saw red from a torn-up primer Jed didn't remember owning. The house felt less empty. He found himself lingering near the table just to hear the sound of breath not his own. That night, Chenoa stepped outside. After Tisa fell asleep, snow hissed against the shingles. She stood on the porch, letting it kiss her bare shoulders. The scarf still clung to her like memory. Jed joined her without a word. "You quiet," she said. "So are you." She nodded, then said, "This." "Safe place," he hesitated. "It's not far from Thewald, but yes, safer than most." Cheno turned toward him. "You alone, long time, .1 to Winters." She exhaled slowly, her breath visible in the cold. "I remember fire in our old house, smell of deer stew. Mother used to sing." Her voice faltered, then Trey came. "Not dear girl, Shed didn't. Move. My uncle traded us for bullets." Jed looked away. "But you didn't ask," she said. "Didn't look. I've seen too much to stare." She touched his hand just barely. "You think we stay?" Hadn't answer. Not in words, but he left door unlatched again. 3 days passed. On the 4th, the sheriff rode in. Jed was mending a gatepost. Chenoa stepped onto the porch. "Sheriff Arland?" Crowley wasn't cruelled, but he wasn't soft either. "Town's uneasy," he said, dismounting. "Says you're keeping Comanche girls." Jed didn't blink. "They're not prisoners, they're guests." Crowley looked at Chenoa. "You claiming her?" Jed paused. "Then I ain't." sending her out into that. That's not what I asked. Jed's jaw flexed. She's mine. The sheriff studied him, then nodded. Then make official. Before Clovis gets clever, he rode off. Jed turned back to Chenoa. She stepped her down from the porch, stood in front of female law, says Mary. It does. Chenna reached her up, untied the blue scarf, and held it out. Then you give this to me again, like a man gives a gift. Jed took scarf slowly, tied it around her neck with trembling fingers. They didn't speak of love, but in that gesture, quiet, weather-worn, unshaken, it lived. That night, he lit the lantern, as always. But this time, he watched a glow against the window with someone beside him. Chenoa leaned her head on his holder. Tisa slept under a quilt. Anthe, wind for the first time in years, didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like a hymn. If this story stirred something in your heart, don't let Fedanto silence. Tap the like button. Soothers may find the lantern still burning. Subscribe to ride deeper into tales of forgotten love, quiet redemption, and second chances. Comment below. Have you ever kept a light on hoping someone would return? And Dremmer sometimes the softest? Stories leave the loudest echoes. More Wild West Soul stories coming soon. Be part of their Firelight's circle.